sync noise, baby. Okay. That's not my script. Fuck. There's somewhat of a safe haven in the gaming world that I often frequent when I'm tired of the AAA gangbusters releases that come out every year. A space that's free from capitalism's plagues and the overwork culture that's been the distressing norm for many years. Fighting to hit a deadline, becoming physically ill and mentally drained just to chip away at the workload that looms over you like a piano suspended by ropes. And the whole time you're hoping, oh god, did they delay the release? The subsection of the gaming development world is a single group, single developer romp. That rough and tumble indie game stuff. More specifically, those of ROM hacking communities. Many people don't consider ROM hackers indie developers, but the absolute workload that goes into changing the game you've been given into something that matches your vision is damn near the same as making a whole game from scratch. Of course, indie games have existed for a good long while, probably before ROM hacking even became as prevalent as it is in the modern age. There's probably loads of unreleased and unarchived jank all across the world. But ROM hacking was a new frontier. And as something as versatile as the Pokémon games, the ROM hacking scene had a moment of mitosis. You've got the ROM hacking community, and then you've got the Pokémon ROM hacking community. Generation 3, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green specifically was a revolutionary age in not only the evolution of the Pokémon series, but in ROM hacking communities likewise. Pokémon games have been coming out for years, and ROM hacks for these have been coming out even before translations of Ruby and Sapphire came out. There were janky things like Vietnamese Crystal and bootlegged cartridges of Ruby and Sapphire with Google Translate ass levels of script writing. All these ROMs and things were dumped online in many, many bootlegging markets. Stuff like the infamous Vietnamese Crystal were some of the first to crop up everywhere, which essentially broke down the metaphorical door which led us to here. 2 Generation 2 remakes in the Generation 3 engine. These 2 remakes, being personal remakes of my favorite games in the series, that's that pure good shit right there. That's the stuff that makes me want to sit down and just waste away my hours playing the same game over and over again with different graphics. In the start of this little multi-part essay review, I'll take you through the first, Pokémon Liquid Crystal by Zyku and Link and Zelda. Crystal's plot is the tried and true formula of you're an 11-year-old who's about to get their first Pokemon and take on the world head first, with sprinklings of a seedy underbelly, evil weeding its way up to the surface. Team Rocket's planning an all-out return onto the scene with the Johto and Kanto regions, despite being directly in the face of adversity, as their team leader Giovanni has gone MIA after his defeat at the hands of Red, protagonist of the first game 3 years prior. You go around the Johto and Kanto regions making new animal friends, defeating others in friendly animal sparring, collecting your 16 badges, 8 per region, and taking down the Pokemafia once and for all. It's the foundation for Generation 2 that hasn't failed since the year 2000, but in 16-bit portability. Liquid Crystal, though, has a bit of variation in plot, with there being an added C-plot involving a second evil team, Team Saturn, and the 2 new rivals, Zane and Axel. Zane is a level-headed, cool guy who enjoys battling the protagonist when he can, and Axel is like Axel from Kingdom Hearts, and he's hell-bent on thrashing Team Saturn no matter what it takes. He comes from this other region, Uoka. These 2 appear and join the protagonist on the game on occasions, and will be there to challenge you at random. Sometimes not for the better. A good example of which being that Axel in particular comes out of nowhere during the Azalea Town Team Rocket segment. You come out of there, out of the well, you've thrashed Team Rocket, you have beaten the gym leader, and then you plan to exit. You plan to go out, and you have your rival battle. That's what you're supposed to have. But then all of a sudden, bam, Axel bursts onto the scene. And then, immediately right after that, a 1-2 fuck you punch to the gut. Your standard Gen 2 rival waltzes up and he's like, "Oh, your Pokemon are fucking weak. Let's fight. I'm not gonna use Pokemon for friends. I'm using them for tools." And can I just get this out of the way? This new C-plot with Team Saturn trying to take over the world with the use of the legendary Pokemon Latios and Latias is more than undercooked. See, it thickens up the plot decently well and adds about 20 extra hours onto the game. But the thing is that it's a division from the standard story that makes the game feel cluttered. It doesn't mesh well with already what's existing in Generation 2. Also, at no point does Team Rocket ever butt heads with Team Saturn at all, making the whole thing feel sort of inconsequential. It's a weird, intrusive addition that will throw you through the ringer with how it jumps up and redirects you away from the main story. Like how after beating Whitney and knocking down the Pseudo-Wudo that blocks off the Goldenrod at Ecruteak and Violet City Junction, you find Axel locked onto 2 Saturn grunts who immediately dash off when you arrive on the scene, and then they declare they're going to go to New York to attack Professor Elm. They storm off, and Axel give chase, and upon getting to Elm's lab, you thrash the 2 guys, and they run off again. Then Axel reappears conveniently after they leave, and they just have a little bit of banter, both Pokemon Professor and your good old friend Axel. It's mostly inconsequential, and a lot of the writing for the game, it's undercooked. Just purely and simply, it's undercooked. It doesn't amount to much more than just, God, fuck those guys, am I right? And it's a little sad to say that it drags down the whole experience for me, because that sucks. This game would be a perfect remake if the C-plot wasn't shoved in so messily into the Johto part of your journey, and instead relegated to just post-game content. I mean, well, if the 3rd region for the post-game content was actually finished. It's just not well formatted into the already existing story, and definitely needed more time in the oven. Especially since it's just kind of haphazardly segmented into the main story. You just kind of chop right into it, split parts out, and then you drop in the segments, and it doesn't really mesh well. There's no cohesion there. Like, it doesn't have anything that weaves into what already exists. It's just extra content for extra content, and it's not even all that well made. You feel it especially hard because pacing is so broken up, because you have to make a mandatory backtrack to your hometown, you have to deal with these other teams, and there's no real reward for it. You're not learning anything else about what you need to do. If anything, it just lets you know that this junction is open, and so you can just run through Violet, back through Cherry Grove, and then boom, you're back in Elm. You're back at Elm's lab, and then you're running back and going all around. I mean, you would have already done that already. That's the entire reason why you get the red scale from the shiny Gyarados at the Lake of Rage. That's why you have the Togepi egg, and you run back to Elm, and you show that to him. There's no real reason for it. You slow down your progress of the main game, you put a pause on the gym challenge, because they couldn't work it in with the gym challenge. I get it that you need more content overall and make it have more impact. You gotta set up that post-game, but it's a little sloppy. It's not well made. I wish I could say more on the matter and try to defend it, but it's just not that good. It is decently carried by its other asset, where the story falters though, such as... Of course, with a jump into new hardware comes evolutions in graphics and sound. Liquid Crystal's visuals feels like what Game Freak would have done to Crystal if it wasn't a Game Boy Color project and was instead like early Game Boy Advance. It's got that sort of semi-jank to it. Although it's made on the Fire Red engine with the graphics to coincide, the map layout for each area feels more vast than its 8-bit counterpart, and I think that's due to the change from the 4x3 into the wider, like, 7x6? Whatever the fuck the Game Boy Advance's aspect ratio is. I know it's not 16:9. I don't know, but the game feels just a lot larger than the original. Just kind of empty. I don't know exactly, but it has that sort of feel to it. Like, specifically, a good example of that would be the junction that I mentioned earlier after beating the Sudowoodo. That whole area, instead of feeling like a condensed area with trees, it feels very wide. and that there's not a whole lot going on. Like, there's something that you could miss if you weren't, like, paying attention. The graphics do look good, though. Most of the overworld assets are entirely new beasts, and they mostly look really good. Time of day cycles make a return with 5 separate times a day, ranging from brisk early morning to darkest night in both battling and overworld. And the weather effects are plentiful, with even the snow and hail overworld effects being brought in from their unused state in Generation 3. It's a perfect blend of artistry and simplicity that is really pretty when you don't stare too hard at it. Link and Zelda and Zyku put in a lot of effort to make this feel like the definitive version of Pokemon Crystal, and to some degree, they succeeded in making it work. It's just got a couple of quirks. Even though the main game is mostly finished, the gym leader sprites sometimes don't display correctly, like how Whitney is a graphical error in her front-facing sprites, and her sides are the only ones that display properly. Every single other trainer, even your rivals, just not the gym leaders. When Jasmine walks away from you in the Olivine Lighthouse, she just goes off the screen into nothingness. There's nothing up there for her to go to. And, the new stuff looks alright. The Team Saturn graphics do have a little bit of a scuffed look to them. Red-haired, scruffy guys with shitty sports jerseys. They're kind of like hockey frat guys with iffy walk cycles. Which, that's another consistent. Sometimes characters just straight up don't have walk cycles and will just slide across the floor at you. Walk cycles just not a strong suit for the devs. It's not my place, though. Walk cycles fucking suck, no matter what. Blessed be a sprite. Ignoring the wonky graphics, the battles look really sleek. The UI is all new, featuring a sporty purple with lavender accents for the text boxes, and gray Pokemon health and name boxes. The battle backgrounds have 5 separate time of day variations, as mentioned before, and these vary due to the location of the battles. Very, very pretty stuff. The purple colors stand in direct contrast with the battle backgrounds, which works in a similar way that the originals did, since there weren't any battle backgrounds that looked like the health boxes. Fire red and leaf green specifically having that sort of beige, brownish color, and all the battle backgrounds being very simplistic. It's a very nice change from the sepia fire red and leaf green. No animated Pokemon battle sprites, though. This is still the fire red and leaf green engine, and we didn't have any of those there. We had some in Emerald, though. I do think that the status effect indicators don't mesh well with the deeper purple of the UI. Stuff like Paralyze and Sleep are just kind of not visible. The color scheme of everything does look pretty good in comparison to the base game, even if it's just a little hard to see on a front-lit screen, like the DS Fat model or the AGS-001. The music as well is really nice, although it's pretty much nothing more than a sound font swap with the MIDI file of the Johto themes. They're passable. Nothing like how the Generation 1 remakes bumped up the feeling of the music to new heights, but it does work. I will say, though, that the Zane and Axel battle themes, which were just the songs from Kingdom Hearts 2, the 13th Struggle, and the Tales of Fantasia battle theme, they're not that good. The compositions are fine, as, Kingdom Hearts is pretty good, and I haven't played Tales of Fantasia, but that music is pretty good. They don't fit with the overall tone set. Also, on physical hardware, the audio gets really fucking crispy. The music and sound effects were fine overall, but sometimes when there's sound effects playing on these certain fights, the audio just kind of crackles, pops, and just stops. The GBA hates these fucking guys. I wasn't really ripped out of the experience or whatever by it. My immersion or whatever wasn't ruined. I can endure the battles all the same, especially since the battles had some pretty sizable changes. Gameplay took the biggest amount of leaps and bounds, with the Generation 4 physical special split, the physical special split being the, Pokemon battles, they use different moves of different types. Grass, fire, water, fighting, dark, flying, etc. These types were designated either a physical type or a special type. Some of these assignments didn't make a whole lot of sense, and therefore gave Pokemon like Absol, which only had slight usability in its debut generation. This was changed with the release of Generation 4's Diamond and Pearl, where the moves themselves were designated whether or not they were physical or special types. Now there's a difference between a Thunder Punch and a Thunderbolt, in which that will be counted in damage calculation. And given that, this being added in balances out the battles and gives viability to Pokemon thought otherwise unusable. Given that, this being added in to balance out the battles and give viability to Pokemon thought otherwise unusable, like Absol and Sneasel, Dark-type and Ice-type moves were solely special until the Diamond and Pearl split. This remake also came out before the 2009 release of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. That's why this is an important change, because the fans took up something that Nintendo was planning to do, but no one knew that at the time. It broke new ground for ROM hacking. Not to mention that some Hoenn region Pokemon have been sown across the land in different areas for a bit of spice in the Pokemon variety. And anything involving evolution, buying, trading, contest stats, etc., those have all been changed to either Evolutionary Stone or a level up using an item in their hands. The split heavily factors into team composition and how you manage your team overall. My team for my physical copy of Liquid Crystal shaked out to be the physically offensive and my dragon counter, Swirl the Politoed, the speedy and powerful Cinder the Typhlosion, the minus speed nature, Bloodbite the Crobat, the oddly tanky and physically defensive Slash Boy the Blossom, my late game Dragonite, who originally didn't have a name until I was recreating him for my copy of Renegade Platinum, Balump, and my even later game edition Gengar, Warafuji. My team for my new playthrough continued to morph and morph from what I originally intended. I had a lot of iffy-natured Pokemon, but eventually it became a little something cool than what I typically run with. There was my starter, Ouija the Feraligatr, Frigg the Pidgeot, Pouch the Jinx, Paul Allen the Arcanine, and the heavy hitter Benson the Granbull. My sixth slot for my team was a little different. I did something unconventional, and I constantly cycled out Pokemon from time to time. I was playing a lot of Shin Megami Tensei around the time, and I decided to take that kind of approach to my sixth slot, where I just kind of brought in new Pokemon as I needed them. That way I could always have something that would give me an edge in the coming battles, just a little something. And I never really settled on one Pokemon over another in my sixth slot. It's something like Pokemon Ranger. Less Shin Megami Tensei, and more Pokemon Ranger. Probably need a good balanced team. Covering types and balancing your moves is crucial with the advanced difficulty of this hack. The AI has been cranked up a bit for this game, with each trainer you encounter having at least an item or two to use, a good spread of moves, offensive, stat changing, and status inflicting. The game was even given an adrenaline shot in the fights, which require you to play the game more than just coast through it. This does come at the cost of making me feel overburdened by the whole thing. I played this first in cartridge form, and then through an emulator, and thank God for speed up. Because sometimes the progress of the game feels more sluggish than Generation 4. And that's probably a bad sign, since I'm a Generation 4 dick writer through and through. I love those games, but if you make a game that feels slower than the games that are known for their slowness, you've kind of gone a little backwards, taking 2 steps back. The difficulty curve is a little imbalanced for a good portion of Liquid Crystal. Starting out, it's pretty difficult. It does sort of take about half the game for it to smooth out, and you'll start hitting the 7th and 8th gyms before the game feels a bit more balanced. During the start of the game, you're on equal footing, just for a bit, and then it's around Goldenrod where the spike becomes more evident. Morty's only slightly more difficult than the previous gym leaders, but then you can take on Olivine, Cyanwood, and Mahogany in any order that you want, and the gym leaders' Pokemon are all in the 30s to early 40s to try to keep the difficulty consistent. But it ends up making it feel like the difficulty curve turning into a difficulty cliff, and I'm climbing up it. The difficulty honestly takes that plateau right after that, though, and it becomes immediately trivial because the entire Kanto leg of the journey is consistent in its difficulty. I think the difficulty bump only really works in the latter half, and that's just a bit concerning because these battles do get tedious, no matter how many new additions and changes to the systems there are. When your team finally gets good enough and you just kind of steamroll everything towards the end, trudging through battle after battle, that makes me think that, that doesn't make a good back half of your game. That's what I think. My overall consensus on Liquid Crystal is that it's an intriguing romp through the Johto region and the Kanto region, 2 regions I'm more than familiar with. And with that means that the issues that arise in this remake are even more prominent than normal. But that comes with the territory of being fan-made. Making a whole game remake as a side project, unpaid, on your own time, that's a big undertaking. even if you have such a deep love for the original and would go the extra mile to remake it from scratch, the issues are glaring. It's 2 lines of code from falling apart, but it's a beautiful testament to the creativity of fans of a series as long-running as Pokémon, and there's even more merit in that alone. Now, Liquid Crystal would stand on its own for a while as the single Generation 2 remake on the Game Boy Advance engine, but that was until a new game quietly stepped onto the scene, this being Pokémon Crystal Dust. A game which was already built from the ground up by one lady, Sierra Affinity. We'll take a full delve into Crystal Dust in the next half of the review, and until then, relax. It'll be made eventually. Come here.